I'm Jason, and today we're diving headfirst into the chaotic dystopian world of Death Race 2000, directed by Paul Partel and starring the legendary David Carradine and Sylvester Stallone. This cult classic takes us on a wild ride through a brutal, high-stakes cross-country race. Buckle up as we explore the outrageous and satirical future where drivers race for glory and survival. From the over-the-top action to the dark humor, we'll cover it all. Just a heads up, this is a spoiler review coming after my first time watching Death Race 2000. If you haven't experienced the carnage yet, hit pause, watch the movie, then come back. For everyone else, let's get into the nitty gritty of this adrenaline fueled classic. Now, there's not a whole lot I can find out about how it did in the box office, but here is what I found. Death Race 2000 opened in theaters on April 27, 1975, with a budget ranging from $300,000 to $500,000. Now, I couldn't find how it did in the box office other than it made between $5 and $8 million. Now, let's get into the plot since I couldn't do a whole lot on the box office. After the world crash of '79, massive civil unrest and economic ruin occurs. The United States government is restructured into a totalitarian regime under martial law. To pacify the population, the government has created the Transcontinental Road Race, where a group of drivers race across the country in their high-powered cars, which is infamous for violence, gore, and innocent pedestrians being struck and killed for bonus points. In 2000, the 5 drivers in the 20th annual race, who all adhere to professional wrestling-style personas and drive appropriately themed cars, include Frankenstein, the mysterious black-garbed champion and national hero, Machine Gun Viterbo, the Chicago tough guy gangster, Calamity Jane, a cowgirl, Matilda the Hun, a neo-Nazi, and Nero the Hero, a Roman gladiator. Machine Gun Joe Viterbo, the second-place champion, is the most determined of all to defeat Frankenstein and win the race. The resistance group, led by Thomasina Paine, a descendant of the 1770s American Revolutionary War hero Thomas Paine, plans to rebel against the regime currently led by a man known only as Mr. President by sabotaging the race, killing most of the drivers, and taking Frankenstein hostage as leverage against Mr. President. This group is assisted by Paine's great-granddaughter, Annie Smith, Frankenstein's navigator. He plans to lure him into an ambush in order to have him replaced by a double. Despite a pirated national broadcast made by Mrs. Paine herself, the resistance's disruption of the race is covered up by the government and instead blamed on the French, who are also blamed for ruining the country's economy and telephone system. At first, the resistance's plan seems to bear fruit. Nero the Hero is killed when a baby he runs over for points turns out to be a bomb. Matilda the Hun drives off a cliff while following a fake detour set up by the resistance, and Calamity Jane, who witnessed Matilda the Hun's death, inadvertently drives over a landmine. This leaves only Frankenstein and Machine Gun Joe Viterbo in the race. Frankenstein nonchalantly survives every attempt made on his life during the race, and he comes to discover that Frankenstein's mask and disfigured face are merely a disguise. He is in fact one of the many random wards of the state who are trained exclusively to race under that identity. And each time they die or are brutally mutilated, they are secretly replaced so that Frankenstein appears to be indestructible. The current Frankenstein reveals to Annie his own plan to kill Mr. President. When he wins the race and shakes hands with Mr. President, he will detonate a grenade which has been implanted in his prosthetic right hand. However, the plan goes awry when Machine Gun Joe Viterbo attacks Frankenstein, and Annie is forced to kill him using Frankenstein's hand grenade. Having successfully outmaneuvered both the rival drivers and the resistance, Frankenstein is declared the winner of the race, although he is wounded and unable to carry out his original hand grenade attack plan. Annie instead dons Frankenstein's costume and plans to stab Mr. President while standing in front of him on the podium. Before she is able to do so, Thomasina shoots Frankenstein, convinced that Frankenstein killed Annie. The real Frankenstein takes advantage of the confusion and rams Mr. President's stage with his car, finally fulfilling his lifelong desire to kill him. Frankenstein becomes the new president and marries Annie and appoints Thomasina as the Minister of Domestic Security to rebuild the state and dissolve the dictatorship. Junior Bruce, the announcer of the Transcontinental Road Race, opposes the race's abolition and impertinently claims that the public needs performances of violence. Annoyed by his complaints, Frankenstein hits Bruce with his car and drives off with Annie to the cheers and applause of the crowd. Now let's check out some of the roles, the cast, and some of the roles the cast has had. We've got David Carradine as Frankenstein. Before his passing in June of 2009, other roles for David Carradine include Raleigh Wilt in Lone Wolf McQuade, Kwai Chang Caine in the TV show Kung Fu, and William Sharp in the Saints Row video game. Simone Griffith as Annie Smith. Other roles for Simone Griffith include Mrs. Stubbs in Savannah, Eleanor Thomas in Untouched, and Carlene Murray in Search of Liberty. Sylvester Stallone as Joe Machine Gun Viterbo. Other roles for Sylvester Stallone include Rocky Balboa in the Rocky franchise, Dwight Manfredi in the TV show Tulsa King, and John Spartan in Demolition Man. Mary Wonorov as Jane Calamity Jane Kelly. Other roles for Mary Woronov include Sandy Harris in Cannonball, Dr. Glatman in Watchers 2, and Abby in The Devil's Reject. Roberta Collins as Matilda the Hunt. Before her passing in August of 2008, other roles for Roberta Collins include Jean Harlow in Train Ride to Hollywood, Tanya Six in 1978's Matilda, and Lana Logan in Hard Bodies 1 and 2. Martin Kove as Ray Nero the Hero Lonergan. Other roles for Martin Kove include John Kreese in the Karate Kid franchise, Ed Ross in Wyatt Earp, and Lou Clayton in VFW. Louisa Moritz as Myra, which is Joe's Navigator. Before her passing in January of 2019, other roles for Louisa Moritz include Rose in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Sally in New Year's Evil, and Sally in the Independent, and that was her final film role. Don Steele as Junior Bruce, which was the race announcer. Before his passing in August of 1997, other roles for Don Steele include Shirley Q. Brown in Grand Theft Auto, Steve Stevens in Rock and Roll High School, and Charlie Cato in Nowhere to Run. Joyce Jameson as Grace Pander, one of the other race announcers. Before her passing in January of 1997, other roles for Joyce Jameson include Rose in The Outlaw Josie Wales, Mary Davis in Scorchy, and Mary Asquith in Love Lines, which was her final film role. Carl Benson as Harold. Before his passing in November of 2001, other roles for Carl Benson include Doc in Enter the Devil and the Dandified Gentleman in the TV movie Murder Can Hurt You. Sandy McCallum as Mr. President. This was Sandy McCallum's only role until his passing in October of 2008. Paul Lawrence as a special agent. Other roles for Paul Lawrence include the restaurant captain in the TV movie The Last Hurrah, the designer in the TV movie Institute for Revenge, and the communications center technician in Meteor. Harriet Medin as Thomasina Payne. Before her passing in May of 2005, other roles for Harriet Medin include Ruth Hutton, Blood Beach, Nell in Killing Time, and The Marriage Licenser's Wife in Daddy's Boys. Vince Trinkina as Lieutenant Fury. Other roles for Vince Trinkina include Paulie in Dean Quixote, Hay in The Wizard, and Luther in The Day of the Locusts. Bill Murray as the Deacon. Before his passing in December of 2003, other roles for Bill Murray include Emery Ludden in the TV show Beggars and Choosers, Judge Bemis in the TV show Boy Meets World, and Hal McCarthy in Dad. Fred Grandy as Herman the German Bach, which is Matilda's navigator. Other roles for Fred Grandy include Dr. Hoover in I'll Be Right There, Pastor Lawrence in Play the Flute, and Gopher Smith in the TV show The Love Boat. William Shepard as Pete, which is Jane's navigator. Other roles for William Shepard include Sam Primrose in The Dead Time, the Rock Freak in Phantom of the Paradise, and General York in Beyond the Time Barrier. Leslie McRae as Cleopatra, which is Nero's navigator. Other roles for Leslie McRae include Cindy in Coffee, Maury in Bummer, and Lucille in The Long Goodbye. Wendy Bartel as Lori. Wendy Bartel's only other role was the reporter at the finish line in Cannonball. John Favorite as Henry. Before his passing in May of 2015, the only other role for John Favorite was the first reporter in Capone. Sandy Ignon as an FBI agent. Other roles for Sandy Ignon include the Doctor in the Morgue and Defenseless, Barry in Down and Out in Beverly Hills, and Dr. Franklin in Creator. John Landis as the mechanic. Other roles for John Landis include Trooper LaFong in The Blues Brothers, Judge Trevino in Laws of Deception, and the Professor in Attack of the 50-Foot Cheerleader. Darla McDonald as Rhonda Bainbridge. This has been Darla McDonald's only role. Roger Rook as a radio operator. Other roles for Roger Rook include Manny Duro in Back to Back, Coroner's Assistant in Wired, and the bellhop in Swing Shift. Wendy Dio as the blind masseuse. This has been Wendy Dio's only role. Now for my thoughts. Yes. My first exposure to the Death Race series was the 2008 John Statham-led film, and up until a few years ago, I had no idea that this movie or its sequel, which is Death Race 2050, existed. Sure, it's a cheesy action movie with cheesy death scenes, but it's a good amount of fun. I went out into this only knowing that David Carradine was in it, so seeing Sylvester Stallone as Machine Gun Joe wasn't a choice I thought I'd see. The origin of the race, being the transcontinental race, was fun to watch, even if it took me some time to get used to. The first kill in the movie by a Spike was brutal and it made me cringe, but the rest of them didn't bother me for some reason. I knew once Calamity Jane went to both Machine Gun Joe and Frankenstein and talked to them about it only being them three in the race that she was going to die. Overall, it was a fun hour and 20-minute movie. Check it out if you haven't. Now let's get into some fun facts about this movie. Explaining why he took the role of Frankenstein in this film, David Carradine said, I started that picture 2 weeks after I'd walked off the Kung Fu set, and that was essentially my image, the Kung Fu character, and a lot of people still believe I'm that guy. The idea was, number one, if you walk off a television series, you better do a movie right away, or you might never get to do one. And the second thing was to do something right away that would create the image of a monster to get rid of the image of that little Chinese guy that I had been playing for 4 years. And, it did start my movie career. Both David Carradine and Sylvester Stallone did much of their own driving in this film. In addition, producer Roger Corman drove in scenes that were shot on public streets, since the custom-built cars were used in the film were not street legal, and the film's stunt drivers did not want to be caught driving them by the police. Custom-built cars used in the film did not run most of the time, so they had to be pushed downhill in order to get them to move at all. Moreover, the cameras used to film the cars were undercranked in order to perpetuate the illusion that the cars were actually going faster than they actually were. According to Roger Corman, several of the custom-built cars featured in the film were later sold to car museums for considerably more than it cost to build them. David Carradine refused to wear leather, so costume designer Jane Rum had to make Carradine's iconic black outfit out of another fabric that looked just like leather. Mary Woronov, who played Calamity Jane in the film, did not know how to drive a car, so a stunt driver did all of the actual driving for her in the film. Close-ups Woronov sat in a car towed behind a truck with a camera crew riding in it. The role of Frankenstein was originally offered to Peter Fonda, who considered the film too ridiculous and turned down the role as a result. Sylvester Stallone wrote some of his own dialogue for the film. Contrary to belief, Frankenstein's dragon car was not actually a Corvette, but rather a Volkswagen chassis kit with a Corvette-inspired body, called a Chalavet. Leslie McRae, who plays Cleopatra, was originally offered the lead role of Annie, but she turned it down because she did not want to perform nude. Thanks for joining me on this wild ride through the chaotic world of Death Race 2000. It's been a blast dissecting the over-the-top action, dark humor, and satirical elements that make this film a true cult classic. From David Carradine's stoic performance as Frankenstein to Sylvester Stallone's unhinged Machine Gun Joe, there's no shortage of unforgettable moments and characters. If you enjoyed this review, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Movies on the Brain for more in-depth movie reviews and discussions of your favorite films. Drop your thoughts on Death Race 2000 in the comments below. What did you think of the race? Who was your favorite character? Until next time, keep your engines revved and your movies on the brain.